Well, hi everyone. Tonight is April, what is it, 20th, 2014, here in the U.S., not everywhere else. I appreciate that, Jeff. My name is Jennifer Maddrell. I'm in Chicago, Illinois.
Dave Cormier, Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island.
Jeff Lebow, Busan, Korea, joined by special guest
Paul Allison, New York City. Hey guys.
Hooray!
So excited to talk to you. This is awesome.
Absolutely.
So, Dave, cue us up with what we were thinking about talking about tonight.
So we had a question from Benjamin Stewart, and his question was, so about your show, what are you guys going to do anyway? And the specific question behind that is, how are you going to be able to curate some of these questions, and how are you going to be able to foster some discussion around that? And before the show, we were talking about that question. I mean, it's a good one. We should probably answer that at some point. But also that it's sort of it's a topic that's close to all of our hearts in terms of how do you foster online conversation anyway. Both in our classrooms and the other educational stuff we do in our professional development and our communities, that fostering a conversation is kind of one of the cornerstones of any kind of successful educational activity. And I think a really good question, especially we got a really great group of people here to talk about it too, because we all do it in a variety of ways, maybe some of us in different ways. So I thought maybe we could start out by talking more generally about how we foster conversation, and maybe that'll lead us to being more specific about how we would. Jeff doesn't like my idea. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, I want to expand it to not just foster as an encourage conversation, but I think Benjamin's question was specifically how do you not archive it, but put it online in a way that's navigable and helps people engage with the content, as opposed to just a river that flows and it happens and it's ephemeral and then it's gone. So that, and we've kind of talked about, we have sort of a core of questions that we're going to revisit in different ways. How can we build something, a web presence of some kind that helps people find us and navigate through what we've discussed? And Dave is back channeling saying, well, isn't that curate and foster? Curate more. You were focusing on the foster.
Sounds like what I said.
Yeah, it's a matter of emphasis, I think. I agree. So Dave was a little leading with the foster, and Jeff's leading a bit with more of the curate.
Yeah, we all get along.
Yeah, we all just get along. But I don't know if I know some folks have been following along with what I'm trying to do with my service learning project, but we have about 50 people all over the country. None of us have met. Maybe 3 out of the 50 of us have ever met and worked together in some capacity. And I had a heck of a time. They were very comfortable with me being the broadcaster on webcasts and throwing out information. And maybe we'd get 4 or 5 people that would join in each week. And I kept trying different things, asynchronous discussion boards, and I'd archive everything like a good little archiver. And I don't know if people were watching the recordings. I don't know if they thought, again, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about a couple weeks ago. To me, this whole online communication thing is awesome. And I just wonder if for some other people it's just noise. And it's like, okay, tell me what I need to know so I can do what I need to do. And then you can go about having your own conversation on your own time.
And by archiving, you are creating a node for each show recording.
Exactly. And I had exactly. I have a web page, and so as soon as I would get it all archived, I'd put a little post out there, and it would have a tag. You'd say webcast. So if you wanted to aggregate all the webcasts or just look at individual topics by tag, and I think it was all. I mean, who knows? It looks like maybe 10 out of the 50 each week appeared to be going back and looking at things. But it's a busy society, and I don't know how many people actually go back and review stuff.
So I took a totally different tack this year. With the MOOC stuff that we've been doing since 2008, this idea of curating and fostering, like how do we find a place for this stuff? How do we make sure that the stuff that's created is actually kept? How do we make sure we're not wasting our time, like where it's just this sort of bubble? It's just an event and it goes away and it has no impact. And I have tried to build a variety of things, much like, I don't know if I put as much work into it as Jen did. I have a funny feeling she probably did a better job than me. But this time, when I ran Rhizo 14, I did nothing. I did absolutely nothing. I put one post up with my stuff and I left the rest of it alone. And what happened is the students picked it up and they started building their own stuff. Now, that's not going to work the next time I try it. I understand that. But the biggest difference that I saw in terms of me not being the master of curation is that people that felt far more ownership over the discussions than when I would try to curate it for them. And I think
Can you
somewhere in there for
articulate a
me,
little bit about how the community curated, and if I want to go engage with RISO 14 content and find a conversation on this topic, how would I do that?
you would have a hard time going to find something on a specific conversation. So I'll give you a couple of examples of some of the things that happened. There's one gentleman, Gordon Lockhart, who created a skimmer that went and skimmed people's comments and posted it on his website. So for all RISO 14, if you go to Gordon Lockhart's site, you can find the little button that says RISO 14, and you can see all the comments for all the blog posts that were tagged RISO 14 during the course. I had nothing to do with that. I didn't know the dude. He does really great work, it turns out. We had a Facebook page, and this time, after the last time when I ignored Facebook, this time I created the Facebook group, not page, Facebook group, because last time it was a page, and pages are terrible. I created the Facebook group myself. I appointed 3 people. I sent out a comment on the first day. I said, does anybody want to moderate this Facebook group? 3 people said yes, and they took it over. And they brought people in, and they talked to people about it, and they curated the conversation in there. The same thing happened on Google+. The same thing happened in Digo, which is a place I never go, but there was a Digo community. And people, like, in one of the groups, one of the sort of social network, and in Twitter with the RISO 14 tag. So if you looked at Digo or RISO 14 or Facebook or Twitter or Google+, you would say, oh, Terry Elliott, who is fantastic, by the way, Terry Elliott just posted this really fantastic blog post, and we've been talking in the comments there for the last 2 hours. You go there, and there'd be like 47 comments in there. And the mistake, like the first week, I started trying to go, oh, and this happened with this guy, and this happened with this guy, and then I realized I didn't need to do that. What I needed to do was get people into one of those places and let them take ownership of what they're doing. Now, it's not going to work for everybody. It's not going to work in all cases. But for what I was trying to do this time, the not taking over, the not trying to create a space meant that everybody else was able to build their own space. But I don't know how much of an anomaly that is.
Paul Allison, you are approaching Teachers Teaching Teachers number 400. How's that curation task going?
Curation task? What do you mean? You know what? I'm not sure. What I noticed in what you just said, Dave, is you identified people who turned out to be wonderful people. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure it's tools, it's people. So that, and that's certainly true on TTT. We don't plan too much about what we're going to talk about, or making the conversation happen. We just work really hard at getting interesting people next to each other in a room together. So I don't know, but so I don't know what you meant by curation.
Well, if I want,
yeah,
Teachers Teaching Teachers has also sort of a core set of topics that's discussed. If I want
that happens over time.
The TTT discussions on creativity, or whatever the topic is, how could I find those?
I mean, you can do it, but why?
I guess that's my question. That's a very good question, because
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
If you're not in the moment and you're not there, how many people really do that? I wonder. Have the time, have the interest level to get that deep in it and listen to the last 50 episodes where he talked about creativity or whatever the topic is. I don't know. What do you think, Jeff?
I don't know. Benjamin and I were discussing this last night, and for people who don't necessarily listen to every show but want to, address. So far we've addressed the question of how do we overcome aversion to change, and I forget what we did. Topic 1. For people who want to kind of engage with that content and link to related resources and find something of their personal interest, how do they do it other than scanning through an archive of posted shows? So I mean, for me, my thinking is, okay, what would we want to build if we could build anything? What are the options, and then what's doable or sustainable? And we can certainly just do these shows and toss them up on EdTechTalk and create a post on a Google community or a Facebook page. But if people want to go back and, you know, I'm really having trouble with getting my students engaged in an open course and have a place to find what they're looking for, I don't think that's especially easy. Like what I think of, I don't know if you've seen Visual Thesaurus. It's where you click a word and it has a bunch of related concepts. And if you click on one of those related concepts, then it morphs into sort of those. I mean, ideally, I'd love something like that. I don't know if that's going to happen, but and I think tagging is a component. But then if you want community tagging, that never works because of lack of uniformity. And you know, we considered Google Docs. There's a wiki possibility, or we just take the laissez-faire approach and just toss stuff up and see what happens.
Yeah, and I guess it becomes a matter of, again, kind of going, we've had this conversation countless times. What do we want this to be? Do we want this to be a weekly 30-minute conversation that's topical, whatever happens, and off we go next week talking about something, a variation on the theme, or is this something to be,
well, I believe a big part of the original concept was that we kind of just share what the community discussion was and then chime in a little bit on our own. Mm-hmm. And I think if we really want the community discussion to happen, then a little bit of curating, prompting or something.
But that's the crux of this situation, right? There's a very big difference between creating a historical archive and creating an ongoing discussion. Mm-hmm. So if what we're talking about doing is curating a past discussion, that is about building an infrastructure that allows you to have the connectivity. I just looked at Visual Thesaurus. Thesaurus on the internets, and then creating the little dots and the connections and the rest of that stuff. Or we can foster an ongoing discussion, which is more about, okay, guys, here's the question for this week. I'm going to drop it in the Riso 14 room, and I'm going to drop it. We'll ask the teachers guys, and we'll ask the guys on the Twitters, and we'll see what we get back. And then maybe on somebody's Google Plus page or a blog post that somebody writes, the conversation will go nuts. And then what we'll do is talk about how that conversation developed on Jeff's blog.
Well, this is about fostering and curating, right?
Well, this is what I'm saying. Like that's where the distinction is between those two things. And we were talking about the differing. Like we're talking about the same thing, but with different emphasis. To me, your description of what you'd like to have, which is an ongoing discussion, has the emphasis on foster, not the emphasis on curate. Because curate's about things that happened in the past that we don't want to lose because they're important, and fostering's about bringing an ongoing thing and moving it, rolling it forward. So if we want to have content that's fresh each week, the curation's not going to help that. The fostering's can help that.
See, ideally, I'd love this. I see there an area of overlap where good curation allows the conversation, just like you go to Riso and there's some conversation about what happened 8 weeks ago that's sparked up again. And if you have a system of curation that allows for engagement and, you know, oh, look, this little area of the curationosphere sparked up this week because we are revisiting this question but from a different perspective or with some new resources or something. That's the dream.
Certainly Facebook does that. There's no doubt. I mean, Facebook is a curation engine. And it does tend to take more popular conversations and move them to the top, so it does allow for some of the things you're talking about to happen. The advantage of Facebook is that when somebody comments on a post that I was involved in 8 weeks ago, it comes back into my timeline, and that's the problem with all of the creating new curation things, is that if that notification stuff is not part of it, it's not going to enter into people's lives, right? And that sort of ongoing multi-member community membershipy stuff is where I think that ongoing communication can happen. The only problem is that up until a year ago, would say the same thing anytime anybody said Facebook, and I've just lost my will to live, and have decided to give in because of how effective it is at notifying people about the things that they were once interested in case they are interested in it again. And that I have not found an effective way of doing that in any other way. It's the only one I've seen work.
Well, I have a question for Paul. 400 shows in, or whatever. Do you call them shows, or I don't know what you call them?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
So, do you find your conversation over those 400 is a variation on a theme, and it's not necessarily a topic, but rather that there's just all these interwoven things that are talked about that just kind of has a way of moving forward, but not necessarily being as connected as Jeff was maybe mentioning?
Yeah, I identify themes, but those. This sounds funny because the people I do this with, like Monica Hardy and Chris Sloan and some other people who are jumping in, and earlier on Susan Ettenheim, are really, really important. Yet I also recognize that some of the themes just come out of my head, right? They're my interests. They're like, so, and I just own that, and I just, I don't. The show isn't for everybody. It's not. It doesn't cover everything. It's like what's real and what's practical right here with me, and the few close people who help plan the show, right? So naturally there are some themes that come up, I guess, and guests who come up frequently. So again, it's the people who gather that make the themes. I don't know if I'm answering or entering this dialogue. Yeah.
I think it's kind of where we started out tonight. It becomes a discussion of, is this supposed to be a conversation that we have and we move on and maybe we'll pick up the topic later, or is it something that we archive and return to, or allow others to return to? And how much do we concern ourselves with that piece of it?
You know what I just thought of is that you must have noticed the reaction, the three of you with John, that you guys are getting back together again. So your personalities and your interests and your questions, people are really interested in. So I wouldn't,
That's nice to hear, although the biggest part of the reaction was, I think 30 minutes is a good idea.
It's very popular.
Oh, come on.
We heard like TED Talks, they're even shorter. A little bit
I'd like to fire this back at Jeff for a minute. Jeff, you're, 35 years an educator now?
Getting close to that.
I'm just looking at the beard down there. I was thinking there's a lot more white in there than I remember.
When I was in 6th grade. But
anyway, and I mean, think about that distinction between curation and fostering. I mean, you talk about the buffet as being your model for how you like to set up a classroom. How much of that with your students is about you caring about the group's archive, and how much of that's about I don't care how we get there as long as we're having a discussion?
I care about both. I care about the person who finishes my class being able to go back to that site and find when they need. I remember in Jeff's class he taught this thing. Yeah. How can I find that? And what's this newest tool? Like I want people to be able to re-engage when it's time for them in a way that they can find what they're looking for.
But you didn't teach a thing. You taught a way to know.
Ideally, but
students don't need to go back and learn how I taught them how to do Google Docs. They need to learn whatever they're doing now. And they know they can do that because they learned the other thing.
Like I said, ideally, realistically, sometimes they just remember that thingy that would be useful now, and they can't remember how to do it, but if they can find the guide, it'll come back to them.
Okay, now let's follow that thought now. How much of that is pre-created by you, and how much of that is a product of your course?
I'm not sure of the distinction.
Well, either that list of resources and all that stuff is something that gets built while you're doing your course, or you spent a whole bunch of time before your course and went, okay, I'm going to get this resource and this one and this one and this one and this one and this one, and I'm going to line them all up.
Both. I have the lineup there, and I don't give them a "this is what we're doing"
everything.
Because the truth is gray. There is no black and white. The truth is a rainbow. Because I have my guides lined up, but I don't do a weekly. This is what we're going to do week 3 because I don't know how week 2 is going to go, and so I base week 3 on where things are at.
Okay, so which part of that, and just it's nice because Paul has given us a really nice extra angle here about the value of the speakers who are actually normally in this conversation. And how, I've been working on and off with Jeff for, 20 of those 35 years.
Oh, he's 20. He can make his little just a baby at this.
One of the comments from my class today about that I heard someone say was, "Wow, you really know a lot about computers for someone who's not so young."
Oh, that's great. But you've always sort of taken a step back from taking an authoritative position yourself about a lot of this stuff, even though, you taught me, and certainly have been instrumental in teaching hundreds, thousands of other people a ton of things. Had a huge influence on people's learning about these kinds of things. And in your classrooms, you take that first step, right, where you put all those pieces together, and then you react sort of as things develop. I totally agree that a student should at some point develop their own sort of personal, I call it a learning network plan. You could call it whatever you want, personal record or something. But overall, you're describing something where you come in with your experience and then you just let things sort of develop and react week on week. What part of that is an ongoing archive?
Learningcall.net, where it's the site that hosts it, and the people who've had my call class know they can go back there, and I update stuff, and so it's current, and I change the screenshots when Google changes the interface again.
But that's great. That's a static set of resources that you keep curating yourself. Community curation is a totally different.
There's also a Facebook group and a Google community where people will post things on occasion.
Because I remember 10,000 links inside of that Delicious account. Right? Like, that's where we ended up last time. And, is that where we want to be again? That was a lot of links.
Did you see the comment? There's a little conversation happening in the chat room. Jason's mentioning it. I kind of agree. Sounds like we're talking about hashtags, right? Right? Like you're either in a conversation in Facebook or Twitter or whatever. Is that what you mean, Jeff? Would that satisfy your curation need if we were more disciplined in our hashtagging?
It certainly plays a role. Tagging definitely plays a role. Taxonomy plays a role. What's that?
Nice, John.
Oh, hey, John. Yeah, John. Let's let John get in here. John, what's the answer?
2-minute warning.
Oh, I got it just in time then. Great. By the time I figure out what you guys are talking about, I will be done. That was the plan all along. Hi, everybody. Happy Easter. Go ahead. Continue talking among yourselves then about hashtags and delicious and whatever you're talking about.
You haven't missed anything in the past.
Hi, Paul. Good to see you.
All right, well, thanks for joining us for Act 3.
So I got a complaint, guys.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So after your first show, after your first show, running to work, I was listening, and I got to work, and I tweeted out my first question. It was, 3 weeks ago? I haven't gotten any answers yet.
What?
Really?
Not even
communities
any.
are unreliable like that.
I don't think that's true. I think
was
you're making
posted
that
as
up.
part of this event link from Paul Allison. What would a K-12 MOOC have in it?
So here's the deal.
Oh, no, we did answer that the MOOC question?
I didn't hear it. How did you answer that?
Last week we answered it.
Dave answered it in about 15 seconds and then made us move on.
And I started to respond, and someone told me to be quiet. That was the rapid round, I believe. Wasn't that?
Right.
That was Jeff.
I think somebody was grumpy that you used the word MOOC without his permission.
I did get a bill for that.
Yeah, I bet.
I only charge in beer, though.
We'll just call him Dave O'Reilly.
Well, shall we toss that out as our tentative featured question next week, which is what would a K-12 MOOC have in it? What connections would it nurture? Would teachers co-design it with students? Do they exist?
And is it a bad idea or a horrible idea? Yeah.
Whoa. Whoa.
Paul, can you join us again next week?
Sure, probably. Yeah.
But in our defense, and we are very defensive. I mean, we've stopped entire shows when we had 1 ounce of criticism. In our defense, we did talk about it last week.
All right.
Yeah, right.
And I know that we're going over time here, but I also don't think we ever actually said we were going to answer any questions.
Yeah. And I wanted to get. That's why it was actually a joke. I didn't expect you to answer it, but like it's still one that I can't like. It's still bubbling for me. So anyway,
Well, let's do it next week.
Next week, we have our topic.
Wow, we have never been this prepared for a show before.
And we'll tag it. MOOC K-12. Should be K-12 MOOC or MOOC K-12. I mean, I want to be
I'm
consistent.
going to curate the shit out of this discussion.
I'm going to take every word.
That's right. So, Jeff, I want a list of resources that I can look at before the show, please.
That sounds like a great task for Jeff.
Where will he put it? Where will he post it? On
It's going
Facebook?
to be
On Twitter?
Yes.
multi-spectrum rainbow of tag
Yes.
wonderness.
Wiki Spaces, yes. EdTechTalk.com, yes.
Google Sites,
Google
yes.
Angel Fire.
Oh, poor people. I am so
Jen,
sorry
you'll
to
do-
you as a listener.
You'll do a voice thread, right?
I'll do a voice.
Hey, you
I love
know-
voice thread.
VoiceThread went no more freemium. There's
Really?
nothing for free on VoiceThread. I know people who are disappointed about that.
Is that person you, Jeff?
I was going to say people
Because I can't
person.
imagine
No,
who else
it was one of my trainees who I had introduced VoiceThread to a couple years ago and contacted me and said, Jeff, I want to use VoiceThread. It's not free anymore. Are there any good alternatives? And frankly, there aren't that I could find.
Okay, we're clearly into post-show here, so did we get an
Okay.
endpoint? Okay,
Okay.
good. That's done.
Thanks, everybody. See you later.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week for more.
This has been IHAQ 3. See you next week for IHAQ 4.
I think there could not be a better acronym for us than IHAQ.
IHAQ. I want to use my little emoji, though. The